Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at the historical accuracy of bounty hunting in Red Dead Online. We're going to get started by taking a look at the actual historical bounty amounts for various crimes in the 1800s. If you committed fraud, counterfeiting, or some other violation of revenue laws, bounties typically ranged from $25 to $100, though there's plenty of cases these being significantly higher. For example, a forger named Alexander Cohen had a bounty on his head of $500. A Texas cashier who absconded with funds from the First National Bank in Galveston had a bounty of $1,000. And most impressively, an employee of two banks in Exeter, New Hampshire, who embezzled a large amount of money in bonds, was issued bounties on his head of $2,500 from each bank, amounting to a total reward of $5,000. Thus, bounties for financial crimes tended to reflect a proportion of the amount swindled. The more money stolen, the higher the bounty. The Protective and Detective Association of Texas placed a bounty of $50 on anyone who rustled cattle, even up to $100 in some circumstances. Stealing a horse usually brought a minimum bounty of $100. Murder could bring a wide range of bounties, from as low as $50 to as high as $500 and up. Abduction bounties could also reach $500. So could robbing a stagecoach. Bounties for grand larceny could reach $1,000 and beyond. But then you have notorious outlaws that committed a number of these crimes, which in Red Dead Online they'd call Legendary Bounties. Billy the Kid, who historians believe killed at least 9 people, only had a bounty of $500, which seems exceptionally low considering his crimes. In contrast, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid each had a bounty on their heads for $1,000. John Wesley Hardin, who was far and away the most dangerous gunslinger in the Old West and who killed as many as 42 people, had a bounty of $4,000. Jesse James and his brother Frank James had bounties of $5,000 each. So did members of the Dalton Gang. If we average out these legendary bounties, we get about $3,000. In Red Dead Online, legendary bounties pay about $100 to $150, sometimes less, sometimes more. As such, Rockstar is paying us only about 4% of what the actual historical payout should be. Another historical inaccuracy in Red Dead Online is the amount that we're being paid for criminals brought in dead rather than criminals brought in alive. Historically, most wanted posters specifically offered bounties for the capture of outlaws, but I couldn't find a single case where a person was denied the reward for simply bringing in the corpse of the criminal. Add to this that many wanted posters warned readers that the outlaw depicted was dangerous or heavily armed. It's little wonder, therefore, how this shoot first, ask questions later approach was so prevalent in the Old West. Take, for instance, the death of an outlaw named the Slaughter Kid. According to an 1895 article in the Oklahoma newspaper, the Beaver Herald, he and another man rode into town, dismounted, and began walking into a local general store. At that point, a cowboy within, recognizing them, opened fire and shot and instantly killed Slaughter Kid. Think of Robert Ford shooting Jesse James in the back of the head when he was straightening a picture, or Pat Garrett shooting Billy the Kid while hiding in the corner of a room in the middle of the night. In other words, unlike Red Dead Online, in most cases, if you happen to kill the outlaw, you could still expect to collect the entire bounty. And when you think about it, the most famous outlaws in the Old West that were captured were hanged anyway, so killing them often saved the time and cost of arresting, jailing, guarding, feeding, trying, and executing them. Now, it should also be noted that these executions sometimes went horribly wrong. Consider the case of the outlaw Black Jack Ketchum, who was shot in the arm during an attempted train robbery and captured by a posse soon after. Ketchum's arm was amputated, but he managed to survive the operation and recover while awaiting trial. As a famous criminal, well known for committing a number of robberies and murder, it was a foregone conclusion that he'd be sentenced to hang. As such, the local sheriff weighed the one-armed Ketchum in preparation. And not to get into too much detail here, but in order to ensure a quick death by a broken neck, you need to determine a man's weight, so you could properly calculate the length of the rope he'd be hanging from. Too short, and it was a slow, agonizing death by strangulation. Too long, and, well, you'll see. For the next couple months, Ketchum waited for his trial, with nothing to do but sit in his cell and eat. As anticipated, the trial came, he was found guilty, and sentenced to hang. Despite the fact that nobody in the town had any experience hanging a man, a local newspaper confidently concluded that, quote, a good job should come from so many at the helm. Unfortunately, none of them thought to reweigh Ketchum, who had actually gained about 40 pounds, nor did they consider the ramifications of hanging a one-armed man, specifically how the body would drop through the gallows at an angle due to the imbalanced weight distribution. Suffice it to say, it didn't work as expected. According to the newspaper the Oregon Mist, quote, When the body dropped through the trap, the half-inch rope severed the head as cleanly as if a knife had cut it. The body pitched forward with blood spurting from the headless trunk. The head remained with the black cap and flew down into the pit. I'm sorry, is that too much information? Regardless, bounty hunting still served an important role in the American West. During this time, crime control policy was not effective at all. There were simply too few lawmen, policing too many people over too great an area. Thus, the bounty system legitimized citizen involvement in law enforcement and provided people who were frustrated by the complexities and shortcomings of the criminal justice system the opportunity to channel their moral outrage in a positive direction that benefited law enforcement efforts and put some money in their pockets. Some citizens received big paydays for their efforts. On May 2nd, 1895, two cattle rancher brothers named Bill and Bob Dunn shot and killed a pair of outlaws and returned the bodies to Guthrie, Oklahoma, where they collected a bounty of $5,000 each, equivalent to about 23 times the average annual salary of a farm laborer in 1895, or in today's money, about $165,000. Now, as a side note, I just gotta also mention this. The two outlaws were part of a larger gang. The Dunn Brothers, fearing vengeance from the gang's leader, went to town and purchased, quote, a number of firearms and 500 rounds of cartridges in order to protect themselves. On the way home, quote, by some means a can of gunpowder exploded, igniting the cartridges. All four of the men, the Dunn brothers, not just the original two, but the other two brothers as well, were blown high in the air. The wagon was blown to atoms, and both horses killed. Bill Dunn was killed instantly, and it is said that others were fatally injured. So, exploding wagons are historically accurate. Moving on. In addition to ordinary citizens acting as bounty hunters, there's also the common occurrence of one outlaw providing information or killing another bandit for the sole purpose of collecting a reward. In one interesting case, an outlaw named Andrew Roberts attempted to collect the reward offered for some other outlaws who were actually seeking him for the murder of a rancher. In the end, Roberts is killed in a gunfight that ensued at Blazers Mill, New Mexico on April 4th, 1878. Again, a gunfight between outlaws trying to collect the bounties on each other. Now, there were some major complications involved with the whole bounty system. The first was the lengthy bureaucratic procedure involved in lawmen soliciting and procuring federal funds for rewards. If an outlaw committed a crime and a law enforcement officer wanted to issue a bounty in order to motivate others to take part in tracking down the lawbreaker, the officer was required to contact the Attorney General in Washington, D.C. and wait for approval. There were also complications with the expenses involved in tracking down an outlaw. Often, the per diem allowance for hiring deputies was so low that it was difficult to convince competent men to take the risk in pursuing outlaws. Letters abound from sheriffs pleading with higher-ups for fair compensation for posse members, which they considered to be at least $5 a day plus expenses. Reasonable requests for additional funds tended to be granted, but there were some sheriffs who requested comically large amounts of money. Take, for instance, an 1881 request from U.S. Marshal J.W. Evans, who sought to arrest a couple cowboys for vague depredations. To bring the outlaws to justice, Evans estimated that he would need 200 men paid at $10 a day plus expenses. He also claimed that he needed 200 good horses costing $100 each, and pack animals, bridles, saddles, and blankets costing $25 each. Amazingly, he also requests money to outfit every single man with a brand new carbine and 2 pistols each. As Evans thought that the pursuit may take up to 30 days, he estimated the total cost of pursuing and apprehending the criminals at $30,000. Needless to say, this request was denied. Another complication with the historical bounty system was that federal and various state governments often forbade lawmen from accepting bounty payouts. In other words, it was your job to apprehend the criminals, so you're already being paid to do so. We see this issue occur with lawman Pat Garrett, who shot and killed Billy the Kid. According to an 1881 article in the Memphis Public Ledger, when Garrett tried to claim the $500 bounty, a quote, hitch occurred in regard to the reward Garrett expected to get from the territorial authorities. So, quote, people of all the cities and towns have gone to work to raise a subscription for him. Now, the subscription ultimately amounted to about $7,000. $100,000, which in today's money would be about $250,000. So bounty hunting rewards, therefore, would only usually go to bounty hunters, posse members, etc. Of course, there are always loopholes. Lawmen knew how to exploit them. For instance, many lawmen made it clear to posse members that they were expected to donate back to him a cut of the bounty money under the table. Other times, knowing that they couldn't collect bounty money from federal governments or states, some lawmen would pressure private citizens and business organizations to post a bounty to catch a criminal that directly impacted their business. Now, as these were private bounties, lawmen could legally collect them. Even then, lawmen still found ways to maximize this payout. A 1964 article in the New Mexico Historical Review contains a letter that was sent from Sheriff Holm Bursum to U.S. Deputy Marshal H.W. Loomis. In it, Bursum states that if Loomis cooperated, Bursum might be able to substantially increase the bounty for the capture of an outlaw named John Hinton by quote-unquote influencing the business and private citizens offering the reward. Then, the two lawmen would split the payout. Now, historically, there was even an official lawman newsletter that would publish up-to-date information on various outlaws. This 5 to 6 page newsletter provided information about wanted criminals, rewards offered, crimes committed, physical descriptions, and when available, photos and sketches. Lawmen paid $1 for an annual subscription, providing them with the latest data on outlaws in the American West. Now, assuming Rockstar adds a lawman or sheriff road in the foreseeable future, this could actually be implemented pretty well into the game. Something like where the players would pay an ongoing fee, something Rockstar would surely be on board with, for access to a newsletter like The Detective, giving details of outlaws that are out there in the world. But rather than a bounty hunting system that simply puts a dot on the map, Rockstar could give players clues to start us on the search. Perhaps we could stay on the lookout for a man with a scar above his left eye, or a powder burn on his cheek. Maybe the newsletter mentions a handful of locations that the outlaw frequents, or info on somebody that may have seen him recently. I'd like to see Rockstar make it feel like we're really tracking him down. You get word that he bought a train ticket to here, or maybe you find a day-old campfire over there. Have it take some real time to find your man, so it's an experience rather than just a grind. Then, of course, pay out historical bounty prices so it's all worth the effort. Even more, Rockstar should allow players in the sheriff role to clean up a town like Van Horn, to break up saloon fights, jail drunks, disarm strangers, return stolen horses, and track down cattle rustlers. Have players work their way up to larger towns, hiring their friends as deputies. After enough experience, maybe even have the option of becoming a Texas Ranger, U.S. Marshal, or a Pinkerton. But a full-time bounty hunter? Come on, it's not even historically accurate. Thank you folks so much for watching, and thank you for the support as well. If you're curious about any of the main citations that I used, or main resources I used in creating these videos, I'm going to put the citation down in the description, so you guys can check those out. The main citation that I used this week, and I just want to give it credit, I have it written down over here. It's called Rewards, Bounty Hunting, and Criminal Justice in the West, 1865 to 1900 by Stuart H. Traub. So check that out. Also, please make sure before you take off to like and subscribe. We'll see you folks next time. Thanks, guys.
Gonna tear you apart.
What in God's name?